thoughts on innovation that sticks, mastering disruption. And I want to share with you a couple of things that I see outside of the industry as well, being a university lecturer, working with companies as well. And in general, what we see that digital transformation, digital disruption is easy, right? I mean, you see that all over the place. So it's a very easy process. You just get together and strategize as a virtual face-to-face if you can. And then you say, let's transform the organization. Let's digitally disrupt. You get together, you put yourself a plan together. You work it out. You work out how you will communicate. You get everybody on board. You say, oh, we will transform. We need to get everybody on board here. You start to create beautiful slides and you say with caterpillars and butterflies. And you say to the people in the organization, if nothing ever transformed, there would be no butterflies. And you think you'll get great excitement. You communicate this and then you implement it and everybody is happy. That's how disruption works, right? That's all it takes, right? Well, maybe not always. And all of you in your field of work, you know, it's not that straightforward. It's not that easy. Sometimes you bring in new things and you see that people are a bit more like, well, what are they doing then? What do we have to do here now again? And that sometimes, oh, there's another change, another disruption going on. And sometimes people just have to be dragged on as well. So what do we do instead? Today, this morning, I want to guide you through a couple of key 3 areas. First, let's talk for the need for digital disruption. Then how, and it's before lunch, but how you can use the spaghetti principle for your digital disruption. And then how you can drive digital transformation as a leader in your field. So let's dive into this. And let's start with the first one, the need for digital disruption. Well, actually, with our big element, the Corona element, Jad has already mentioned that in the video. Probably you haven't had any big necessity to convince everybody for digital transformation. Like things have happened very fast. People needed to see, and we've seen probably some of the greatest changes out there. But it won't stop there. And the future, and today we'll be looking as well in the future, maybe as well like the post-Corona future might look different. You might need to get people on board as well on this. And as we all know, the internet and digital transformation continues to add either a 1 or 0 to your organizational formula, to your strategy formula. And I like that how Ben Thompson here put this. And we all know what happens when we add a 0 to a formula. Everything can fall down. So we need to continue to disrupt ourselves. We need to continue to tap in some fields to avoid the proverbial Kodak moment, basically, to be away, not only in our business, but also in the ideas and services and so on that we provide to the organizations. Now, why do we need to do this and continuously need to look at this one? I like this here. I've come across an internet meme that I think like really summarizes our approach like quite well. If we go back to 1988, maybe some of you around there was a big saying like, don't get into a car with strangers. When we came to 2002, it's like, whoa, the internet's not like, don't meet people from the internet, woo. And literally, if we go to 2019, so to speak, we have Uber, where what you do is you get into a car with a stranger that you've met over the internet. 2019, very successful. In our times, 2020, of course, now Uber is also looking for a different way to see that. But what is interesting here, of course, the model of Uber would not have happened, basically would not have been possible in prior times. It was only the event of mobile phone, of all the technologies and so on that were out there that enabled this. And that's what I call technology stacking, basically. Sometimes new technologies come up that enables us different things, and these enable further. So we need to constantly look out to see what can we do, how can we disrupt further. So the need for digital disruption, probably I don't need to convince all of you for that need. But now let's go to the second part. I would encourage you all to use the spaghetti principle. What is the spaghetti principle? Let's first look at the world in where we live in today. At the moment. And let's not only look at Corona times, but look at your industry, your work, your organization in general at the moment. And sometimes I like to divide it into a static environment or dynamic environment. Do we have a long operating history or a short operating history? Well, if it's a static environment with a long operating history, what we can do here is predict and plan. And probably some of you might have been going in this one, like, okay, there was a constant upgrade cycle and so on. But what do we do in a dynamic environment with a short operating history? Like a lot of us were forced earlier this year into it, but also in general, when new technologies, different things come up. What do we do here? Here, probably the words of Joseph Campbell ring true. If the path before you is very clear, you're probably on somebody else's path. If the path before you is clear, you're probably on somebody else's path. That might not be a bad thing, you might be copying, but if you want to truly disrupt, if you want to continue to grow, you might need to do something different. And here comes in the spaghetti principle. I'm not sure what's in for lunch for you today here, but the spaghetti principle, I think, can highlight us quite nicely what we need to do in terms of disruption. There are fundamentally in the world 4 methods of telling if spaghetti are ready to eat. And I've asked hundreds of audiences basically for this, and they always come up with 4 different methods. How can you tell if spaghetti are ready to eat? Think it maybe for yourself. If you cook or if you watch while other people are cooking, how can you tell if spaghetti are ready to eat? Sometimes people say, well, I taste them. Some people go, I look at them. Some people go, oh, it says 12 minutes, and after 12 minutes, they're gone. And then there's a certain subset of people that do something very special. What they do is they throw them at the fridge or at the wall and see if they stick. That's what that looks like in our kitchen here when I tried this out. They see if they stick, and if they stick, they're ready to eat. Now, some of you might say like, oh, they're a bit over ready to eat, but that might be personal taste. But I like to use that much more as a metaphor. As a metaphor in this environment, in this dynamic environment with short operating history, what we can do here, test and iterate, throw things at the wall and see if they stick. That is the only thing and the only way in an unknown world how we can do. And that's what I've seen great disruptors do. They throw things at the wall in a controlled way and see if they stick. Now, very often, right, we see like, okay, where should I start all this? And like what Tim Elliott says, if you don't know where to start with your digital disruption, begin with your customer journey. That could be if you're faced with customers, but also all of you have internal customers, external customers, people you work with. And there you can see like, how can we continue basically to upgrade, to do changes, to do things that are more cost efficient, that are different, and throw things at the wall and see if they stick. So very often we look at only at products and so on, or some pieces of technology, but it's much more. It's services, technologies, processes, but it can also be yourself in your leadership, the way you operate and so on. Also here, I would recommend to continuously throw things at the wall and see if they stick. Now in today's event, you will hear lots of ideas, what others have done, how you can do this, how you can throw stuff to the wall. So of course it's technologies, but also you can do maybe the way you meet and operate. If it's too fast that you meet, maybe you can try this one also with the social distancing as well. I can assure you the meetings are quite short at this, or you can try out other areas. For example, I like what Katarina Fake did, who is a board advisor. Basically, she says, you know, all of my meetings are full water meetings. What is a full water meeting? Well, at the beginning of every meeting, everybody has to drink 2 of those. And the first person who needs to somehow run away, so to speak, closes the meeting, speeds up things. So it's not only in the technology side, it's in the way we operate, be it meetings, be it now in remote connections, which we'll talk later on today as well, new ways of working, try out things and see if they stick. The only thing one can truly navigate in that disruption. So it's not only the products and so on that we go, but in all fields, what I've seen the great disruptors do and the great disruption companies and technology companies do is they go into all that fields and throw things at the wall and see if they stick. And if you do that, if you see and if you continue with the things that stick, you will slowly get to a better place. But maybe you need to also look at other things. Maybe also to put in a degree of wildness, because very often what happens is that people go on and throw stuff and throw spaghetti to the wall, but they go like with some controlled experiments, like, oh, it goes in. But sometimes I recommend also to a degree of wildness, to really go fast and bold in this one. And why do we need to do this? In order to sometimes go to even a better place as well. And that's why in your spaghetti pot, so to speak, what I recommend to have is really like these bold and wild ideas from time to time. Shelby Foote said, I can't begin to tell you the things I discovered while I was looking for something else, for trying out. And today as well, I recommend you look for new ways, look for things that you can try out that maybe weren't on your plan before, but maybe bold and wild ideas and so on that you can put into place. So we have the need for digital disruption. We have the spaghetti principle. Now, how can you individually drive digital transformation? And that for me is a key question. Of course, we can say digital transformation is key. We see it in all the newspaper articles and so on. We go very digital and so on, and we put in beanbags in and table foosball or the virtual equivalent and so on of this. But sometimes the reaction that very often comes is like this from the audience, like what do we need to do? Like your organization, and probably you've seen that, like we need to do what and so on. But I think if you really want to drive digital transformation, sometimes you need to look at other fields, what we all individually can do. And what is that? Well, let's look at the words of Peter Drucker for that. He said once, only 3 things happen naturally in organizations. Only 3 things happen naturally in organizations. And what are these 3 things? Friction, confusion, and underperformance. For that, you don't have to do anything. That just comes with working together in an organization. And maybe you know somebody who knows somebody who has experienced this. But what he says, everything else requires leadership. Everything else requires leadership. And that's why I think like the great disruptors are leaders in their field, in their circle of influence are great leaders. Now, what is good leadership? Very often we see now on social media sometimes that hero model of leadership, that super person that, wow, everything is great, everything is that superhero model. And then people say like, wow, that's not me, that's the whole leadership thing. But I would like to do a little thought experiment with you. Think about the best disruption leader you've ever worked with or for. Think about the best disruption leader that you've ever worked with or for. And that should be a real person that you've worked with. Just reflect about this for a second. What comes to mind? Probably what doesn't come to mind, I've asked this thousands of people this question, probably what does not come to mind is like, wow, yeah, when we started that virtual meeting, the way basically they put me down in that video conference in front of everybody, oh, that was fantastic. Probably that doesn't come to mind. Probably also what doesn't come to mind, like, wow, how everybody was running around in this crisis like I had this chicken, oh, that was brilliant, that was great. Probably also that doesn't come to mind. But maybe something different. And what I see in great companies that disrupt, that truly disrupt, something special comes to mind. Because very often we hear this failure is not an option in implementation. Well, what I've seen the great disruptors do is they say like failure is actually an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating. Now that is really one kind of important area here in this trying out, in this truly disrupting. Now, but many of you are, of course, responsible for critical infrastructures, for putting it in. So whenever I hear about this failure culture and we need to fail, I always think like, yes, it's important for disruption, but it's also there. I don't want to have everybody all the time that attitude. So for example, my heart surgeon, I don't want to have that attitude of like, well, great, let's see what we can do here and so on. At some moments we need, of course, as well to be clear. And then lots of you are there. So how do we reconcile this best? Well, that's, I can see best with actually one of the greatest things and one of the greatest transformations I've ever seen, which was actually in a manufacturing plant. They were one of the fastest innovators, disruptors in the way they manufactured. And what did they do? Well, the plant manager said he has line 12 thinking. So what is line 12 thinking? He said, 12 of my lines, I manage for efficiency. 11 of my lines, but my line 12, that one, there we run experiments. There we test out everything. There we put in new stuff in. There we do everything different. So my question to you is, in your field of influence, what is your line 12? Where can you start and disrupt and so on to then roll it out towards the organization? That is what I see great disruption and great companies do. So as Satya Nadella said here, in order to be a great disruptor, in order to be also accepting that failure is an option here, but also moving forward there, I think one of the key things we all have to do is to do not be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. Don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. And I think that one, you're here today to learn about new things, about new fields, and we continuously need to learn, navigate the unknown, throw things to the wall and see if they stick, basically. That is what I've seen the greatest disruptors also do. So there we go. We talked for the need for digital disruption, which in this day and age, like nobody has to be convinced of, but it's really always being on the lookout for that technology stacking. Is there a right moment, a right thing coming up that we can actually do right now? Use then the spaghetti principle, throw things to the wall and see if they stick. And if they stick, continue doing them. If they don't stick, well, that was the experiment. And then drive digital transformation with really truly being a digital disruption leader. I want to leave you with two quotes. One is by the business philosopher Clint Eastwood. He once said, because like when we talk about this disruption, people would say like, well, but do we have a guarantee that it works? Well, sometimes it goes like, if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster. And I think that is very true what we have seen, but also I think the words of John Templeton ring true. It is impossible to produce superior performance unless you do something different. And that is the key of disruption. That is the key of getting to that mindset of disruption in your field of influence, really seeing like, what can we do? What is bold? What is changing? What can we implement right now? So with that, I wish you a great start of the conference, a great rest of the conference, and think always about to throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. What could be a spaghetti that you can find over here?